Hi Sharat, hi Ambika, how are you doing today?
Hey, good. How are you, Joe?
Yeah, we're doing
Deepa?
well. How
Super,
are you? It's great to see you
good.
on a video.
Likewise. We would have loved to host this talk in person,
Yeah.
but given the unprecedented times, we'll skip the handshake and we'll just go with the high five. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
Sharat, thank you. Obviously, we know each other for over 15 years, and I've had the opportunity to work with you at Cisco and more recently at VMware. And for the benefit of our viewers, I just wanted to do a quick introduction and take this honor to introduce you, Ambika. Ambikas Sinha, the Director of Executive Recruiting and Talent Enablement across APJ at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And obviously, Sharat, I know you, but I'd like the viewers to also get a feel. So Sharat Sinha, Vice President and General Manager for Asia Pacific and Japan at Checkpoint Software Technologies. I'm going to now just quickly hand it over to Neeta to take the conversation forward.
Thank you. So, hi Ambika, hi Sharat. So, I
Hi,
have a
Neeta.
few questions. Thanks for joining today. As you know, Eduism is a platform to share, mentor, and motivate. And what we want to really do is reach out to the youth. So, we'd like to know a little bit about each of your journeys and what made you choose what you chose to reach this stage that you're at. So, we could start with your childhood, Ambika. Maybe you can start with a little bit of that.
Sure. I mean, I grew up in India. I was born there, and I grew up in a very small township of Uttar Pradesh in North India. So my dad worked for the Aditya Birla Group, and he was a senior executive, but located in the operations side. So we were in this manufacturing industrial township, as they call it back in India. And I grew and I did my early years of education in the captive school that was there. It was very close to what our children get in terms of the private education, as we call it, right? It wasn't driven by the very competitive public school system that sometimes we experience in India or in a large city. And I had the unique opportunity to study in a school where also at a later point my mother was a teacher, and she was a very she was a
Wow.
very well known and good teacher in the sciences. So I guess you may I studied up to the middle school years, and then of course I went to the boarding, which was typically what was done to one
Which
of
boarding
India's.
was that?
Yes, so I
Sorry,
actually
which?
went to India's. If you ask me, arguably the number one school for at least girls, as they call it, women. So it was a girls only school called Loreto Convent. I went over to Lucknow, there the branch in Lucknow, and I was in the boarding there. Did my high school, finished my high school from Loreto in Lucknow, and then of course I mean, then there was a later journey, right? My undergrad and my postgrad.
Right. So, what did you choose to study in college?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So, like I was saying, right, my mother was in the sciences. My father was an engineer and a top one at that one.
Yeah.
So I was very much encouraged and I think influenced into picking up sciences. So I did sciences up to my high school.
Okay.
But as a child, I was very strong in humanities. I was usually, and I think people like to talk about it, but I was a front ranker, front bencher. So you pick up sciences in India, and there were two professions at our time, right? You either go with medicine or you go with engineering. Long story short, I after sciences in high school, um, I realized that my passion was actually not medicine, and I was obviously looking at a career which was really, socially really responsible and great for the
Wow.
society. But my interest and my passion and my strengths probably laid on the humanities side. Having said that, So I went into an undergrad. My college was actually in humanities, and I chose to study a newer subject at that point of time, which was sociology, right? Sociology, political science, and history. Interestingly, what helped me was, and this is something that I love to share, is putting in the principles of science, or the way you learn science, sort of the rationality and structure into humanities education. So I was fortunate to be able to do that, and I think it worked really well in my undergrad. And then eventually, of course, I went on to the corporate world. Excited me in North India at that time. If you were good in humanities, you would go and appear in civil services exams. But again, I chose the less trodden path, and I went on to do business administration. So I did my MBA after my undergrad. But yes, humanities all through, and then went into business
Right.
study.
So did you feel the pressure initially before you chose your subjects that I need to do what my parents did? Did you feel that pressure from any side, or did you feel it self inflicted pressure?
Yeah, I would say it was less of pressure, but more of that, the drive and the competitiveness, where you see everyone around you, your peers, appearing in competitive exams, getting into engineering and medicine. And so yes, it was there. If you ask me, I didn't even think of anything else. I was only thinking of sciences because all the top students would go there. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it is fine for you to choose a path initially where where the top students go to in your society. It's eventually that you get to understand. So you can have a journey, and I think
Sure.
it's less of pressure. It's more of just a journey, that there's a story behind it.
And what made you switch from the sciences to humanities? What was that moment?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I realized doing sciences in high school was really tough in a top school like Loreto. And I realized at one point of time that I was not enjoying my studies. I was enjoying it up to my grade 10, but the high school couple of the final years were really tough. And while I succeeded, and I got the sort of the grades that you look for, I realized that I could choose two paths. One which was very successful, but something that I'm not enjoying and passionate about.
Right.
And I have to say, I did get a lot of support from my grandparents who lived in Lucknow at that point of time. And I was in the boarding, and I was chatting with my grandfather, and he said, so I said, yeah, I'm probably going to give medicine competitive exams. And he said, do you see yourself as a doctor? And I got thinking, and I said, he didn't have a sort of a guiding question. But I said, I might be a doctor, but I would not enjoy that. And he said, so what would you enjoy? And so and I think the answer was inside me, and the soul searching was going on. But, you look at people around you, and you look at what professions they're doing. And I was immediately inspired by some of the people who were getting into business studies, or people in corporate world, and everything changed after that for me.
Right. Thank you for that. And Sharat, can we get to your childhood? Get back to your childhood.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, obviously, I grew up in India, and I lived in all 6 states as I went through my high school journey. So I've studied in 7 schools to do my IB equivalent, grade 12 there.
Oh, wow. Till the 12th. Yeah.
Till the 12th. And first, actually, my father was in a transferable job. So I also grew up in industrial townships because my father was used to be a project, used to be managing large engineering projects. And so we lived in Assam, Bengal, Bihar, UP. Finally, my parents even moved to Gujarat and Rajasthan, and finally to Delhi. So as they moved, to different states, I studied in different schools. But when my father was in Assam, actually, I went to boarding quite early, to a boarding school. So I went to Krishnamurti Foundation Rajghat Basin School in Varanasi. So it was a purely residential school when I was in grade 7th. And that had, I think, significant impact on how I took my decisions later on, because that school didn't have concept of tests and exams till board exam. So till you
Oh,
went to grade 10, there
okay.
was no exam or
There was
test.
no exam.
There
But
was no
that's
exam
interesting. Yeah.
test. And they would allow you to explore all subjects, etc. And being purely boarding, it had slightly different impact. But my final 3 years I did in Delhi. So I
Mhm.
went to Delhi. Finally, I did my 12th from Delhi Public School. Again, I was in boarding because my father was in a transferable job.
Right.
And yeah, so that was the high school journey. And then I decided to do engineering. And
Okay.
generally, I've noticed, and if I look at our journey as well as our kids' journey, you take decisions based on what you know of, what you're exposed
Sure.
to. So growing up in industrial townships, I had mostly seen engineers doing well, or my father was an engineer.
Yeah.
In fact, my grandfather was an engineer. So we kind of knew which might have driven me towards engineering, but I never felt the pressure actually. I
That's what I
thought
wanted.
I thought I
Yeah.
liked it. I went for it, and I had my obvious, if you could call it obstacles or struggle as well, in the sense that after I did my 12th, when I tried for the first time, I did not
Mhm.
get the branch I wanted. So I did undergraduate degree in sciences for first year.
Okay.
And then after a year, I got into the engineering discipline I wanted to do. I did electronics and communication engineering, undergraduate degree.
Sure.
And then I did masters in industrial management from IIT Kanpur, which was a natural transition. Subjects
Right.
wise, I could have taken any direction. I really enjoyed studying history, for example, when I was in my high school.
So both
I,
of you liked history, basically. That's a common.
That is
yeah,
true.
history.
That's
And one
correct.
of the reasons, one of my maternal grandfather was professor of history. So when we would go in summer vacations, I would see a lot of books, and I really liked his personality, the way he would communicate and
Yeah.
talk, tell stories. Being a history professor,
Right.
that drove my interest. But most of the subjects I studied, I had liked. So my choice of getting into engineering was more driven by what I had seen.
Sure.
So those people who are watching this, I would say get exposed to as many professions as possible, then you can make a meaningful choice. If you know limited, you go based on that.
Yeah.
Having said that, I would not say that I chose something out of pressure or anything.
Hmm.
Based on what I knew, this looked like a logical choice at that stage. So I made
You
that
made the
choice.
most. You made the most of
That's right.
what you learned. That's great. So that's beautiful. I think what I like is that y'all went through your obstacles, came out of them, didn't look at them as obstacles. I think looked at them more as challenges which you need to overcome. Is what I'm just summing up,
Yeah,
seeing both of you, just hearing both of your
that's
stories.
right. Now, I guess in all stories, you'll find people do see obstacles. You make mistakes as well. And you
Yeah,
reflect on them, you learn from them, you move on. And you hope
right.
that
So
you don't do
let's.
the same mistake again.
That's true. So as parents, do you feel, do you imbibe what your parents, their practices? Do you feel you're very much like your parents? Ambika, what about you? Do you feel you're, do you follow the same ideologies as them with your children, or do you feel, you've had to change that old thinking, which was probably modern, but you have to change it to now, what's going on now?
That's a
Still
great
a lot of
question.
change.
It's a great question. Um, I think there's a natural style that you pick up in from your nurturing environment, and initially I think a lot of us do that. Again, my parents were really involved in my growth and education. My mother being an educator, so there was a lot of telling style as well that I initially had. I think I have tried to evolve and change a lot, and I don't think my style of parenting now looks any similar to what my parents did, because it was a completely different paradigm and scenario place. um, the only part that I continue to do is that high involvement, For me, the parenting is not so much about being the parent. It is
Mm.
about being the facilitator, enabler, someone who is alongside when your child is at that obstacle and needs someone to either talk to or be able to just communicate about their hurdles. But I'm very different in believing that it is their journey. We can just facilitate and give them a platform initially. Everything else gets created. Of course, my children, I mean, maybe I'll share here, right? They're both, one is a teenager, the other just, turned an adult. And so, the evolution of our parenting also has been very, it's a long evolution. And what I talk about parenting now is as of now.
Yeah.
The other part that I do want to share is that I don't think parenting is about just you. It's about your child. So the most important part is knowing who they are, right? So whatever humanities that I studied, I tried to use that in trying to understand my children, and
Right.
I have to say there was a lot of learning. Um, so yeah, we are very what is the right word for this? Agile parenting, especially as a
Yeah.
mother. You need to be
Flexible.
constantly
Mm.
aware, flexible, have that communication ongoing, be there for
Yeah.
your children. I mean, I've always worked, even when my
How did
children were
you,
kids.
yeah, how did you balance that?
Yeah, I think it is possible. You have to, what we, the concept of work-life integration, right? I think by nature a multitasker, and I sort of enjoy having things to do and an identity beyond, being a mother or a wife. But having said that, I did make certain choices. When the children were very young, I was in the education sector to start with. I took a little bit of a break from corporate, taught in the National University of Singapore. And and so that gave me the flexibility to be at home, do my classes, but be back there. I had a very nice setup, so I could bring my baby over to. There was a cave and everything that you don't get in corporate. So all that
Yeah.
was really facilitated. I always chose a job because Sharat travels a lot, in his roles. Even though my role is regional, lot of my travel is autonomous, and of course the quantum of travel is much less. So yeah, so you have to make those choices. And I think the second part of parenting is who your partner is, and what are you like. So I
Mm.
completely believe that your style evolves based on what your partner is doing, and you completely have to
Sure.
be a team for them, for your children.
Right. I'm sure you all have complemented each other very well, seeing your children. So I
They
can
try
tell.
to. They try.
Looks like captive, but I think we tend to, again, agility and the ability to tolerate some ambiguity, right? If one parent is taking a very active role in a certain area, then you need to know when to step back and
Right.
let them take the lead, and again complement each other, not confuse them, don't create any dissonance by saying completely different things. But again,
Mm.
that happens.
That
And
happens. Yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And when it comes to parenting, there are some fundamental principles which are fairly universal. At the same time, each situation is very unique, and it also keeps evolving. I think as parents, we are still evolving, right? A few things we have done, but at the same time, it's not that the learning has stopped. And when it comes to your own parents, you always carry a bit of your parents from all sides, right? So, for example, uh, my mother is an ultimate optimist. So that optimism I have carried in my life. I think that's something I picked up from her. My father is extremely practical,
Mhm.
which has also come in me. And depending on situation, I use them selectively. But I also learned quite a bit from my grandparents. At least when we
Okay.
grew up, we would see our grandparents during summer vacations, etc. So we had this
Sure.
opportunity of learning a few things from them as well. And when we looked at our kids, our situation has been very different. So we grew up in a country, we studied in the same country, we started working in the same country. Therefore, everything that was learned in that context is not 100% relevant for our children, which we realized quite early. Because yeah, we are
Right.
from India.
Yeah.
Our kids grew up in Singapore. My daughter is studying in the US. Most likely, the son would follow, same destination. So, given that if we applied the same parenting principle in terms of choice of, whether it's subject, profession, everything else, it may or may not be relevant. So, what we did in our case was to closely understand what do we want out of this whole process. For example, you typically want your children to become strong both physically, mentally, spiritually. You want them to choose a profession that they would enjoy, and in
Yeah.
fact before they get to the profession, pick up subjects that would be fulfilling for them. Your learning is also a journey, right? We were lucky that our kids started at UWC very early. The school has also contributed significantly, I feel, which was
Sure.
important for us because I felt while I was studying, did my high school, that high school plays a big role in ultimate education. So combination of those things, and we have tried to help them dream big, at the same time be extremely realistic about what they can achieve, and then pursue them. And we also ask them, encourage them to actually get information from other sources. I always tell my kids, look, we are one source of information,
Right.
but do
Yeah.
go out and explore other sources of information, and then
So,
make up your own mind in terms of decision making.
right. That's really nice. That's a good point and insight that we can allow other mentors to come into their lives.
Right.
That's great. I had another question about, yeah. So when Snigdha left, your daughter, when she left for the US, I mean, it's always difficult to be fully prepared when your child is leaving. So that must have been quite painful, but I'm sure exciting because she got into a really good university. Um, so the question I have is that when did you know that she will leave Singapore and she will go to the US? And how did you prepare for that long term, you know?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
I think Neeta, for us, it was 2 years before she left that we knew that she would be leaving Singapore. And I think to
Mhm.
Sharat's point, when you decide as a school for your child, you also probably are making a choice there. Most of the children in the international private school education here tend to leave Singapore, and it doesn't at all mean that Singapore is not the right place. It's just that the
Mhm.
opportunities for them in countries like UK or Australia or US are particularly huge. I think the
Yeah,
second aspect of it is that again, our daughter or our children were decisive. We gave her the complete freedom to say to us where she wanted to study, and she did say that she couldn't wait to fly out.
yeah,
They want to be at a place where they feel more independent,
dependent.
and choosing their path. So I think a couple of years before she left, we sort of knew. And I think Sharat was a big facilitator in doing research for us. So we did, we went to, I told him, I don't know if she wants to leave Singapore, but I really don't know where she will go. We have studied in
Yeah,
India. So we did a journey, really all four of us. And I think if you have another child or the sibling of the first child who's leaving, it's a great idea to bring that child along,
Yeah.
irrespective of age. So we all had a family journey through the higher education campuses.
right.
It was more of a tourism, but even then we covered both coasts of US, really understand what these schools were like, what was campus like. Let
Yeah,
her of course explore, but it was journey for all of us. And so those 2 years in her IB, we knew that she had certain preferences, and I can tell you literally every day we talked about it. So you prepare yourself by participating and by
right.
talking about it and thinking. But having said that, nothing really prepares you for their physical
Yeah,
separation of leaving. But again, I think it's a feeling of sadness mixed with a lot of pride when our
Mm-hmm.
children go. And it can be anywhere that they go, but since the process is so tedious and tough, to get into a school of their choice, you actually feel so ready. and
Right.
and when you see them feeling proud about going to a certain place, um, you're able to prepare. I think that the second
Right.
thing is, two of us responded very differently. If
Mm-hmm.
I can speak for myself, I was not as excited about her leaving, but after she left, I think I was okay. As a woman, you
Right.
have a lot of network that you get to talk to. You have a lot of peers
Mm-hmm.
whose children have left. So I was able to do that. I was talking to a lot of people over coffees, and we were sharing our
That's nice.
sadness
Yeah.
of them leaving. um, I think Sharat can share about how he got prepared and what his feeling was really like. But it is really a roller coaster. You have to be
Yeah, I'm
prepared
sure.
for that.
And the key thing is, when kids go, obviously you feel the vacuum. Kid you see
Hmm.
every day coming back from school, at least having dinner with you, and suddenly they come only once in 6 months.
Right.
But I personally feel that, as long as they're at a place where they're happy, they're enjoying, they're healthy and comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
you feel all right. And life has different phases. So you have to, and every phase has its beauty. When they're
To
with you,
adjust
it's
that.
nice. When they go, also, it's nice. I think we really know when our second kid leaves, when Aryan leaves
Yeah.
us.
Then it'll.
It will
Right.
be an empty nest, but I think again, because we know, and he has seen her journey, and he's probably heard 4 or 5 years of that conversation about
Yeah.
leaving a country, going and settling in to study and learn. um, I think we are preparing ourselves. I mean,
Yeah.
Sharat already talks about what are we going to do. We're going to get deeper into our careers, profession,
Yeah.
maybe holiday more if we can, right? That is unimaginable in these times. Or really get more busy with the community work, right? Give back to
Yeah.
things that we
Yeah.
do. So you have to let your children go, and with an empty nest, you sort of then know that yes, this is it. They are out and they are making their life, and you have to contribute on just where it is needed, and let them fly, right?
Let
That's
them
what,
fly.
let them fly.
So what if your kids, just hypothetical, what if your kids had chosen to stay back here in Singapore? You would have been supportive for that as well.
Oh, yeah,
Oh
of
yeah,
course.
we would
We
And
have.
what
gave
if
them
one of them,
yeah.
yeah, and what if one of them would say we want to go and we want to explore India and we want to try it? Then how do you react to that? That's
It
would
would
that
have been slightly different from what we had planned, but we would be generally open.
sure
For
be
us,
open?
it's like this, as I mentioned earlier as well. You make choices based on what you know,
Right.
right? The paths that you know, and some people like to explore paths that nobody knows. But over a period
That's
of time, the
nice.
way our parenting has evolved is that we want them to pursue paths that they like, guide them based on what we know. For example, I
Mm-hmm.
have slightly traditional thinking in terms of choice of career and etc. I want that I feel that a person should choose a career where you can contribute meaningfully to the society
Mm-hmm.
and become independent. Because there could be certain choices you make which might look like an interesting hobby, but you can't be independent pursuing them.
Yeah.
But that's my view. I'll let them
Mm.
explore other views as well. But after that, if they make a choice, we'll support it. There are kids, we'll support them irrespective.
I'll give you an example, right, if that illustrates better. So, a lot of children take gap years, before
Yeah. How does that work? Yeah.
they go to college. Yeah. So again, right question. We did not know how it worked, and as Sharat said, you decide based on what you know. So
Yeah.
if there was a conversation about it, um, I think at some point of time you have to tell them, what are you trying to get out of this, and let them decide for themselves. If Snigdha had said she wanted a gap year, and it might have come up in a discussion hypothetically,
Mm-hmm.
I think we did not say yes, oh great, or oh no, gap years are not, But what we might have said to her was, what do you want to get out of it? And typically a child, if they're choosing gap year to rest, or if they're choosing gap year to decide what they want to do, you can we can coach in what
Yeah.
could be another alternative, if you all feel that gap year is not the best thing. I think the current generation or the next generation is very aware and smart about it. But if they really want to take their time on something, you have to let them think about it rather than being completely opposed.
Hasty.
That's
Yeah.
my style. Even though
Yeah.
we would discipline and everything, but I would want them to think through and then come to us. So
I also expose them to opportunity cost of it. If you choose a path, you're giving up
Yeah.
other. As long as they're prepared for the consequences of it, it's perfectly fine.
yeah,
That
but
sounds.
you can make it a partnership and they will listen to you. If you're close to them, they will listen and they'll make your choices or your sort of preferences their own. But it has to become their own. If it doesn't become their own, then they can't succeed. That's my complete philosophy about parenting. But they need to own
Right.
it.
Sounds good.
What-
Yeah. That the cost to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What repercussions it has. You make them think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds great. So, any other questions? Do you have any questions?
No, I just thought these were brilliant insights
Yeah.
as we start to prepare for our teenager to make these decisions in about 2 years. Sharat, love your advice about choosing a career that you can contribute meaningfully to society. I think that's powerful. And Ambika, it really helps for us to know your insights about how you as a family prepared for your daughter to go to the US and now for your son to possibly follow her footsteps. So thank you for sharing that. That's brilliant.
Thank you
Thanks.
for being.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks both of you. It's been great discussing this subject.
Thank you.